Sherry's been watching this and she says, my horse is exactly like that horse. He ignores my stomping and clapping. Please, can you point me in some direction for some strategies that will help? So there's obviously quite a lot of videos that we've got on how you can get a horse out of your personal space online. And we do cover that in quite a lot of depth. We've got a whole section on, creating personal space, which also creates leadership. But can you just talk us through what people can do, what should be going on in their head, and what strategies can they use, or perhaps what they shouldn't use, so they can make it really clear that they don't want this horse to come in on them and nip them and with anything that they're just not comfortable with. Can you just talk us through what the good things are, but also perhaps what negative things that they should be avoiding doing as well?
Firstly, I'd just like to try to talk to everyone about the context of me getting a person to stand very still and sort of put up with that, the horse kind of slowly kind of nibbling away at us and kind of, just not doing anything about it. Now, there's a lot of people, and I'm guessing the context of the video firstly would be, to be a good horse person, you have to be very resilient, and to be strong and grounded, you have to be very resilient. A lot of people are very twitchy around horses, and they kind of micromanage because they're making decisions all the time too early and kind of managing everything. And I sometimes get people, there's two reasons I get people to stand there, and this has got to, what we've got to think about is the first reason is, how much can you put up with before you crack? Now, obviously, I don't like putting people in dangerous situations that, I just sit on a chair with a kicking horse that's, in the wrong position and all that. But there are times that I see people that have been eroded a little bit, and their strength has been eroded by that horse constantly, maybe taking some space and, being a bit narky, nibbly, whatever. And I say, just ground yourself and stand still. How much can you put up with? And realize that don't make a decision early, make a clear decision. So some of these lessons are for the people to kind of realize that they can actually withstand more than they actually realize before they sort of, twitch or do something. So when they do something, it's something thoughtful, not something reactive. Now, often cases when you're doing that lesson with the person, the horse actually starts to realize, oh, this is not causing anything, the person's not doing anything, oh, I'm bored of this, and they sometimes let go of it, and then they just stand quietly and they pick up on your groundedness. So some horses that are niggly will pick up on your groundedness, stop niggling and just stand quietly, but whatever they were getting a reaction and a response from us, they stay niggly, especially those kind of playful, annoying ones that seem to kind of keep wanting to sort of poke. And a lot of times if someone doesn't do something, the horse will let go of that idea and stop doing it. It doesn't mean that they're all going to do that. Some horses just start to push a little further and push a little further. And their communication to you could be a way of communicating, or it could be just an anxiety response where they like a displacement behavior. It could be anything. But if you're feeling that the horse stays there and you're as grounded as you can, you're not reacting, you're not, at the earliest signs of things, then you have to do something to say, I'm not happy with that. Can you let go of that? Okay. And that's where creating awareness. So some people might bang their leg and jump up and down, but it doesn't do anything. The horse just goes, oh, I've seen that 100 times. And that's where you've got to look into going, how can I create awareness with my horse? So sometimes, for a horse that's been dulled and overhandled, and, because you've got to think of horses that we poke and prod and pat and scratch and rug and bridle and saddle, and we do that to them all the time, that they're so sort of handled that there's nothing that really bothers them or makes them go, so we're looking to create caution in our horses sometimes. So we actually have to do something to make them go, oh, I didn't expect that. So that's where sometimes I'll carry a bag on a stick or something, and I'll do something really big with it once, so they go, oh, I really noticed that. And then suddenly their awareness goes up and they suddenly notice everything and all the little things. So sometimes you just got to get big enough to make that change, create the awareness in your horse, and then go back to being grounded. And it just means, because being a tree, sometimes if you've practiced being a tree and the horse is still pushing into you, then you need to be a tree that creates awareness, that the horse is aware of you. And then they'll understand your personal space. And really, when it comes to sort of behaviour where horses are niggling us all the time, we have to show them that there's things that we sometimes don't like, and there's times for things. Like there's times for mutual grooming, but you can't be just standing there and the horses all the time poking to sort of, have a conversation and kind of fiddle all the time. So there's times that you just want your horse to stand present, and just be calm. So when a horse goes, I'm communicating with you, you say, well, actually, I'm fixing the fence at the moment. And you can't communicate with me. Can you just stand present while I fix the fence? So then you say, let go of that thought. And I think sometimes when we've had a shutdown horse, it's easy to get them to communicate. When they start to come out, we want them to communicate with us, so we allow all these things to happen. But then by allowing that without certain boundaries, then they start to sort of, it's just like a blurry conversation. They're just blur, 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 blur all the time. But then we say, no, I'm standing quietly. You stand quietly. You don't need to constantly keep talking to me all the time. So it's just about teaching them how to understand our body language. And when we're neutral, they can be neutral. When we're communicating and together, well, we can communicate together. But they have to understand that neutral presence in us. And it doesn't mean, it means that they can be quiet when we're quiet.
All right, so a horse that comes in on their space, what do you do?
So with personal space, the biggest thing is it's personal space, and it's just something that we have to be clear with. So I think the biggest thing in personal space is there's one thing is a horse often moves our feet, and the people don't notice that. Like a horse might move and we move a little bit to cater for that. And then the horse realizes that, every time I move, the person gives me space. And that makes the horses start to get sort of pushy and take our space because they've always been given that space. So the first thing is that groundedness and say, I'm not going to move. You can't shift my feet. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing in personal space is what's the distance that you want. Some people are like, they're very unclear, and then the horse gets in their space and annoys them, and then they go, get out of my space. But they could have said at a meter, that's my boundary. So basically, you're best off saying to a horse, whatever you choose to be your boundary when you're just doing other things or walking around your horse and whatever, you choose that distance and you set that distance. You don't wait till they're on top of you, then push them out. So as soon as the horse touches the boundary that you've set, which you remember, so you have to have a good tape measure in your mind, you do something to say, that's my boundary. And if the horse is not aware, say an aware horse, you might just bang your leg or say, put your hands up and clap or something, and they might go, oh, that's the boundary, right? Got it. And it only takes them a few goes. An unaware horse who's really resilient, you might have to carry a flag for the first so many times and really get big once or twice. So they go, oh, why did you do that? And then they realize it's only when they sort of become unaware of you and your boundary that you'll do that. And then basically once they're aware, you can go back to just something subtle. But if you do create awareness, you can spook your horse a little bit. So that's where if you did spook them a little bit in creating awareness, you don't get your flag and run at them and say, you came into my space. And that's the other thing that I think people have got to think about. I've seen people that try and create personal space by when their horse pushes on them, they push their horse back. So when you're pushing your horse with your energy, the horse is moving backwards because you're moving into them. They can't create space. So when you create personal space, don't move at your horse, because you're not saying I'm going to push you down the pecking order. You just do something that creates that awareness to get them to step back and be aware of that meter distance that you've set, but you don't walk at them. And because you're not walking at them, they can create that space very effectively. So and then they won't get, it won't be personal, and they won't get worried about it's personal because you just stood still when that happened. And that's really important. Now, the horses that don't know how to back up, you have to do a session of awareness and how to move backwards away from a visual stimulant, because a lot of horses that get a bit of an eye spook or a bit of a worry and their eyes open up, they preload the hindquarter and they're always wanting to go forward. And there's a lot of those horses that have been sent on in round pens and lunged and things like that. They don't know how to withdraw in reverse. So if you've got one of those horses, you have to spend like some time putting some stimulant in the air in front of them so they can see it and step back as one other alternative opposed to run forward or sideways. So those horses need to be taught to back up before you can even think about creating that metre or 2 metre distance away from you that keeps you safe.
And how important is timing in this? You know, if the horse is pushing on you, and I suppose you sort of think, oh, I'll just see what he's going to do, before you know it, a few seconds have gone by. Is it quite critical that as soon as they're in on you, that's it, they've hit this sort of electric shock boundary, or or does it not matter?
Yeah, watching people do this at clinics, month after month, I do notice that I can walk up, do something once, and then it has a long-lasting effect. Whereas I see the person do it, and after about 3 or 4 times, it starts to dull again, and then all of a sudden the horses look and start to get heavy and a bit stodgy and not really responding. So part of it was their timing, because the horse kind of walked in that extra foot, and then they kind of said, oh, by the way, that's my bubble. But the bubble was a foot earlier. So they didn't do it exactly at the right time of the metre. I'm saying the metre that they might have set. So the horse kind of gets confused because, so that's partly both. That's not just timing either. That's actually lack of clarity. So because their timing was late, the clarity was unclear because the boundary became unclear. The other thing is effectiveness and clarity. So basically, a person might, with a sort of a horse that's been dulled, they do the right thing, that their timing's right. So they pop the flag or something, or bang their leg or something when the horse hits a metre, but they did it in a way that the horse goes, oh, I didn't really notice that, and the horse takes that extra half step. So then they've got to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then the horse steps back. But what that does is it sets an example, or sets the bar, that you can get a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and the horse doesn't do anything until you get big. So basically, sometimes you get clear once, and then after that, you can be really quiet and the horse will notice it. But if you just start quiet all the time and then slowly increase, the horses tend to actually dull down to the lower amount of feel, until you can do number 10 and they didn't even notice it. So and I think people, I think what they do when they create a boundary or they guide a horse, that what'll happen is they'll put a pressure that doesn't have feel in it. So they just pick up a flag and pop it. And I'm like, I would have just picked up the flag quietly. Once the horse is sensitive, pick the horse flag up quietly, and the horse goes, oh, I see the flag picking up, I'll just step back. Whereas they'll shake it like that, like a bag, and then all of a sudden the horses go, oh, that's a shaking bag. And then all of a sudden they're resilient to the flag shaking. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of things in there, but once you get it and understand it, it becomes very easy to apply. It's just being observant and having a good sensory awareness. Like you still want to be doing what you're doing with your primary focus. You just got to heighten your secondary focus to what your horse is up to. You do have to be careful that you're not primary focus on your horse all the time, because then you lose your leadership, which means your horse is going to be like, I don't know where they're going or what they're doing, because they're just staring at me all the time. So then they don't trust you as much, because you're not looking like you're in control of yourself. So you just got to heighten that awareness of where your horse is, where its thoughts are. So sometimes a horse will step back, but their thoughts are still over the top of the person. So of course they're going to push back in again. So that horse you might have to do a backing lesson where you step back once, try again, step back again, until the horse's thoughts come back into a back up, and then they stop and their thoughts are just standing still, not pushing forward. And that's I guess the other big thing is they have to think backwards before they'll center and stand quietly.